Like any good car enthusiast, I have multiple projects in progress, and I bought a new one. For those of you Toyota fans out there, you already know that's a 100 Series Land Cruiser, and I'm so stoked to be back in the Land Cruiser life. So a quick fleet update here. The Celsior is running like butter. It's my daily driver. BMW is doing pretty good. Still some work to do on the tune, and it still leaks in the driveway, which is really annoying, so I need to get that figured out. The F-150 project is underway. You haven't seen this yet, but there is a lot of information coming on this particular engine, and that is currently at the machine shop. But of course, the point of this video is to share with you this new Land Cruiser that I picked up. So I am so stoked. I actually had the LX470 before and not the Toyota Land Cruiser specifically, but of course, I'm sure you probably know those are more or less the same thing. The primary difference is being the front end. I think the Land Cruiser one specifically looks way better. It's just kind of more simple and more elegant. The LX470 has two different headlights. There's like a brights one on that side and then your regular light. They're kind of slanted at a weird angle, and I don't think it looks as good. And then of course, there's some differences in the interior. Couple of things that I've noticed is the gauge cluster in the Land Cruiser specifically is not nearly as nice. The LX471 just looks so much cleaner and more elegant. The door cards have like kind of a rubbery texture here in the Toyota, but on the LX470 they have like a really nice voluptuous leather to them, and that's really nice. But otherwise the cabin is almost identical. So of course you might be wondering, well, why did you sell the LX470 if you love it so much? And it's primarily because that thing was so insanely rusty. I bought it during COVID, sight unseen from a dealership up north, and I had no idea how bad rust and corrosion could be from a vehicle up there that spent, 20 years of its life rotting away. So I sold that one, and in my next one, I had an absolute zero tolerance policy for rust. And as you can see, it is basically perfect. That's really awesome. I noticed under the front end, there's a little bit kind of in this cross member here, but it's really not bad. And it's like mainly surface rust. This is not even like 1% of how bad my LX470 was. So this is a 2002 model, and my old one was gold. This one is obviously this like forest green of some description, and I actually love this color. It's still got all the nice kind of like flake, metal flake in it in the paint, which is really nice. And then the other thing is that on the way home, I drove about 5 hours to go get it. I crossed over the 200,000 mile mark. So if you know these Land Cruisers and these Toyota 2UZs, this engine is like barely broken in now. My LX470 had like 215 or 218,000 miles when I sold it. So there's just still so much more life in this engine. Under the hood, everything looks really good. It actually looks like it has a new brake master cylinder. It says Ace in Japan on it. I think normally they say Toyota, and I believe those are expensive, so that's nice to see. And then other than that, there's a lot of common rust areas, like mine was really rusty all along this pipe. You can also just typically look in the engine bay and just kind of look at the various bolts and stuff, like this thermostat filler neck here will rust, like the bolt on the idler pulley and those kinds of things. There's just a lot of telltale places that it will rust. And of course, just as you would expect on a vehicle like this, I drove it 5 hours home with no issues, and here we are. Now there is a squeaking tensioner though, so I took a look at that yesterday when I first got home. Then of course the Land Cruiser's party piece being its sweet split tailgate like this, which I absolutely love. And then you can pop this one down like that. I love this because you have a nice bench or you have a nice seat. Very sweet. But one of the other places they rust really badly is in this upper hatch. Typically it's like right in here, around this handle, and we're all good here. I was also told this is a one owner vehicle, but that would tell me otherwise. So what's the plan for this thing? Well, of course it's gonna be drive the absolute heck out of it, but also do all the major maintenance items that this thing is gonna need to keep it on the road for a long time to come. It's gonna be our road trip car everywhere we need to go, daily driver, could be a tow rig too, because these can tow 6,500 pounds. Granted, you're gonna get like 8 mpg, but that's just the way it goes in these. So I wanna just dial this thing in. These 2UZs are timing belt engines, just like the 1UZs, and they're very similar actually. They share a lot of parts, like for instance, the idler pulley, the timing belt kit, I think if not identical, it's very, very similar. And so the timing belt on this car is unknown last condition, it being at 200,000 miles now. It is definitely ready for a service. I don't know when it was done, so I just need to do it. Another good maintenance item is these heater tees. There's one here and then there's one right behind it. And those are just kind of a plastic metal composite of some description. They're really affordable. They're only like 10 bucks, but they're a great maintenance item because those can leak coolant. Then another thing I noticed when I was kind of rooting around the car the other day is that it looks like we have a pretty bad valve cover leak on this side. The other side is almost surely similar. So we'll go ahead and get that sorted out. As I'm sure you recall, we did valve covers on the Celsior, and those are not quite the same. They're not quite comparable, but similar in principle, same idea, very similar parts, similar cost. It's really affordable to do it, even with OEM gaskets and bolts and all that. Yeah, so I switched over to the passenger side, and very similar story over here, just weeping all over. So definitely need to go ahead and do that. Of course, it makes sense, this being the UZ family of engines, but the OEM oil filter works on both the 2UZ and the 1UZ. So, I mean, like I said, it makes sense, but I obviously want to change it because it's some sort of brand I don't recognize. And just like all the projects here on the channel, I want them to be as OEM as possible, or OEM plus. Something else that I've shared before, I think, is that I want to own all 3 of the UZ family of engines at some point in my life. Right now, I happen to have both the 2UZ and the 1UZ together, which is pretty awesome. And in the future, I'll get a 3UZ LS430 or Celsior whenever we're ready to import those. But for now, this latest addition to the fleet and the channel is going to be just a mission to get this thing totally dialed in and be perfect in every way. Of course, the truck here is still continuing and will likely be my primary tow rig, but this is going to be kind of the family vehicle road trip, maybe some towing here and there. Of course, if you like to see Toyota stuff, which I imagine you do if you're following the Celsior project, you'll probably also like Land Cruiser stuff. Some of the other little interesting bits about this particular LX, I just said LX. In my family, we referred to the other Land Cruiser just as the Lexus, so it's funny to have that still muscle memory baked in. But it's pretty typical for these higher mileage Land Cruisers to have cracks in the seats. Seems like the reupholstery kits are pretty readily available, but these 2 seats are pretty chewed up. And then I made a discovery when I was driving home, which is why that thing is on the floor. And I was like, man, this is kind of a weird option for somebody to pick. And as I started to look around, I was like, this doesn't really feel factory. Like, wait a second. Then I noticed the buttons aren't lined up, and like the switches down here are not lined up. And I was like, I know that's not factory. And then I realized these things are just awful stickers that somebody put over all of these panels. I was like, why would somebody do this? This is awful and terrible. And when I peeled this one off of this upper stack here, it became obvious. It was like, okay, yeah. So somebody just decided that this awful faux wood rubberized trim was a good idea. So those will be getting ripped off. I'm gonna have to get the heat gun out, but they're everywhere. It's like around the key fob, which looks disgusting. And then also, really the dead giveaway was right here. I was like, this is not factory, because there's no way they would have these corner trim pieces on the handle and then not have this and have this much of a gap. It looks awful. So all of that will be coming out for sure. And then eventually what I'll be doing is swapping this screen, which does function, although it looks absolutely terrible even when the car is off, back to the standard rotary switches and knobs. From my understanding, it requires like 50 different wires to be spliced, but that's definitely doable. And then I don't know if it's even possible, but I would love to get this steering wheel resurfaced. It's just like pretty beat up, and it's not like sticky or gross, but actually it is a little bit sticky in the sun, but it just, I don't know. I just don't like the ugly look of that. So that's hopefully something we can fix. In the back seat, I was pretty stoked in the photos to see that there is these TVs in the back of the headrest, but they actually have quite a bit of problems. So they look terrible, they're low resolution, there's some kind of awful like fade, they melted somehow, I guess, and they don't really work. So I'm gonna be getting rid of these, also because these headrests don't stay up. So like, this is not a comfortable seating position. I want my headrest like roughly right there, but you can see it just falls down. Like, these don't do anything. It's just like terrible. And then these also don't stay where you put them, so we will definitely be getting rid of those. As a kind of a side effect of those, there's like all this extra wiring, and then in this center console there's all the like wires, I think, for this, like an audio cable. There's like the yellow RCA, the red audio cables, all those kinds of things. There's the yellow one right there. I haven't tried that CD changer. I need to do that. And then looks like somebody jankily added in the headphone ports for the 2 screens. So, I mean, I like the idea of having screens in the back of the headrest for road trips, but this is not it. These are horrible. Also, back to the seats a little bit, and kind of the differences between the Land Cruisers and the LXs is these armrests on the LXs, at least, maybe these are just broken. You can put them wherever and they just stay until you push it all the way back up and it unlocks again, and then you can push it back down and it will just stay. But here in this car, they only go down to that kind of dead spot. So as I'm sitting here talking about this, I'm wondering if maybe I could swap in the Land Cruiser or the LX seats, and I would still retain all the same power functions because those are identical. And then maybe I could have a nicer seat bottom. Maybe they would look a little bit better, and I'd have the nicer armrest, because I wanted it the whole drive. I wanted it like right there, not all the way, but like, you know, more than it was by default. And then of course, as you can tell, this car has totally bone stock suspension in every way. All the factory components are still intact. In fact, the shocks in the back say Toyota. The ones in the front here also say Toyota. Everything else, I believe, is pretty much 100% factory, which of course is great. I mean, I would rather have blown OEM stuff than have somebody have put on, you know, Moog or some other like garbage Mevo Tech or something like that. So really, the question for me becomes now, I don't think I'll do the lift and tires and all that kind of stuff like I did on my other Land Cruiser. We'll probably do camping, and we'll probably do off-roading trips, you know, out west, like to Colorado. My son and I did that a couple of different times. You know, my son, my girlfriend, and I have gone various different places in the LX, like North Carolina and so on, but I don't know how much of a off-road rig this will become. So that kind of opens up the question, do I go with Old Man Emo again like I had on my LX? Do I go with Dobinson's? The reason why Dobinson's is on my radar is my good buddy Aaron has a GX, and that thing has Dobinson's, and it is unreal how good it is. It's wildly comfortable, and it's long travel. Really, really amazing setup. So at most I would do like the 2.5-inch lift like I did last time. That's about all you can do before you start jeopardizing your, you know, your CV axles and stuff like that. But maybe in this case, I would just go with 1 or 1.5 at the most. That way it's not too tall and too awful. But it definitely needs some suspension work as well. For now though, the mission is going to be do the critical care items on this 2UZ, like the timing system, the cooling system, and that kind of thing. Get it totally dialed in, just enjoy it around town, and then we'll worry about bigger stuff like suspension and interior stuff later. I hope you're excited about this addition to the fleet here. I absolutely love the Land Cruiser platform. It is just amazing in every single way. I absolutely love this thing. I'm so glad to have another one that's not rusty, that I can put more love and get so much more life out of. So if you're not already subscribed here, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Let me know what you think in the comments, and are you a Land Cruiser fan? I certainly hope so. See you in the next one.